All right, I got to do one more. So we had been basically the U.S. National Forest System was a sacrifice zone. We're talking about in 1904, the U.S. Forest Service was formed, and there was a environmental activist named John Muir. He's very famous, and Teddy Roosevelt is famous for being one of the most environmentally minded U.S. presidents. So Teddy Roosevelt founded the U.S. National Parks, and he also founded the U.S. National Forests. But there was a big debate and argument because John Muir was saying, look, the forests are the most valuable part. They're the part that needs to be preserved. So we're calling these national parks, they need to be way bigger than what you're thinking. So what Teddy Roosevelt, what people were saying is, well, let's make parks out of the scenic areas where in the environmental movement, they kind of cut the diminutive term of rock and ice, which meant they were not biologically diverse. And then all those mountains, as you go down the mountains, that's where the big trees were. And of course, the timber industry always wanted the big trees. They had already basically clear cut the whole eastern seaboard and the Mississippi Valley by this time. It's just devastation. And so there was a combination of protection and even restoration. There was this other guy named Gifford Pinchot, and he had gone to Europe because Europe had pioneered this idea called selection logging. And the idea of that is you just cut the weakest trees. Now you can call it ecoforestry. And it's kind of like if you've ever had a fruit tree and the fruits are growing too close together, the branches, what you do is you look and you see, well, this one is obviously the weaker branch. It's going to die, but it's taking energy, light, it's competing with the other ones. And you trim out the weaker branches on your fruit tree, and you get way bigger, better fruits on the ones that you leave. And so when you log in this very conservative way, the actual biodiversity, the biomass of the forest keeps growing because if you look at a tree ring, the bigger the tree, even though the ring is small relative to the tree, it's just a huge amount of biomass. The big trees add the most biomass every year. And in clear cutting, you just cut down all the old growth. You plant some little seedling the size of my baby finger, and that's going to grow at a high percentage rate, but it's not adding the volume is not really that much. So selection logging, they call it then ecoforestry, where you're really trying to constantly improve the ecology. I met all these old time foresters, this guy, Walton E. Smith, and he had bought like a cow pasture and turned it into you couldn't even tell, it looked like just an ancient forest because he had spent 40 years just applying these principles to a bare patch of land. And it's just amazing what he had restored to this formerly degraded piece. It'd been a forest, turned into a cow pasture, he restored it to a forest. Okay, so anyway, Gifford Pinchot created the National Forest with Teddy Roosevelt. They said, no, we're going to manage them in this European way. Well, as all, as part of that kind of thing, if you give somebody an inch, they're going to take a mile. And the timber industry got their mitts in there. And bit by bit, they started logging illegally, violating this thing called the Organic Act that had laid out the rules. And of course, their cronies and corrupt people had worked their way into the industry that's called regulatory capture. That's the problem with all governments, is that we want them to regulate, but the regulators are the people that we the people are trying to regulate. It becomes very difficult to regain the real needs of the ecosystem, the needs of the people, when the regulators are the very enterprises that those agencies were set up to regulate. You could say the Forest Service had been set up to regulate the timber industry, but it became owned by the timber industry. And so when I got into that movement in 1990, we were part of this whole citizen movement to try to take back the control of our lands. These lands were held in trust for us, the citizens, but they were just being basically just, looted. It's the only way to say it. And you can see from the satellite photos just the destruction of the forest ecosystems. And they had all kinds of rationale. Oh, those old trees, they're dead and dying. And it's just the amount of lies that had come up in the field of forestry to rationalize taking something that they did not plant. Oh, those dead trees were worth a lot. They weren't dead yet, but they're going to die soon. So let's cut them before they die. That was the whole theme. So us eco freaks were trying to stop that and, stop the logging, restore the ecosystems. And the problem is that we weren't really making all that much progress legislatively. And so this goes back to me deciding to experience. So I left. So basically the organization I co-founded, through various mistakes of my own inexperience and the notion of some of the other people I worked with, we didn't want to be involved with the major groups because they did kind of have a problem of capitulating too soon in order to get a deal. So they didn't have the greatest track record about actually defending the environment. Their strategies sort of worked. It's easy to be Monday morning quarterback about, they're all good people trying to do good work, but we disagreed on strategy. Even though we had the same basic goal, stop logging on the national forests, we just used different language to express that we thought would be more palatable. So we weren't, in the end, finally, I realized there's no right way to ask people to take care of the planet. You just ask and you do it the best you can. So not only had we created kind of enemies fostered the idea that there were enemies in the Congress, which is a very collegial body. It's not anywhere near as divisive as it looks on TV. It's more like summer camp. The more I got to know how it worked, you can't make any headway in there. You're not going to make headway if you go there with hatred for anybody. But that's what most, activists do. They pick their enemy and they name them as enemies and then they aim at them. So anyway, I left, but we had done the same thing with the environmental groups, the ones that were not pure like us. Not only were we aiming at our enemies in front of us, we were like shooting backwards at our so-called friends, the ones who were closest to us. So we were not talking to our enemies in the Congress, and we also weren't really engaging in honest communication with our allies. And this is a classic movement dynamic. You can just see it going on. Anytime you look at any kind of movement, you'll just see this behavior because everyone's in scarcity. Everyone's trying to fund their own work. They're trying to prove they're the best and get attention. And so unifying movements can be very difficult. That's why, again, in 2001, I shifted to a purely financial approach to create businesses that just do the work that we want to achieve in the movements. And by the way, if you donate to charities, those charities have economic visions. If their vision of the world became reality, there'd be an economy around that. The time to start those businesses is today. But so back to 2000, I decided I would just walk in the door I'd go to the hallways of the US Senate and just walk in the door and go to the desk and see if the senator was there to talk, which, it's a little weird, to be honest. But I was a civilized guy. I looked like a normal person. And so I would just go. And the thing is, as you're going down the hall, you see the name of the senator on the door. And I'd look at the name and I go, oh no, that guy, no way that guy's going to do anything good. And so part of the purpose of this exercise was for me to try my new kind of peace-based spiritual leadership. And all I say is I heard my mind trying to protect me from going into the lion's den of my enemy. And I'd listen to that and say, okay, well, thanks. And now I'm going to go in and see how it goes. And and I noticed it didn't matter whether they were somebody I thought was a good guy or a bad guy. No matter who it was, my mind said, no, this is dangerous. This is a terrible idea. That was a hilarious realization from this experiment, just how much resistance I had just to being a human being with other human beings. That's our big problem as human beings. We hate everybody. You know, if you can get over that, you can do a lot. In fact, this even experiment, I ended up hiring somebody to lobby at the Congress, and I said, your only goal is to just see. She had had some training like me. We were in the same program, the leadership training program, and I just said, your job is just to see if you can be loving. I don't care what results you get. It was amazing. The results she got from that, lobbying for, I had another project, an environmental project to create the ecosystem sector in the Department of Commerce. I wanted them to start counting the ecological economy. This is 24 years ago. Anyway, so finally, I started walking doors. I went up to the desk. I said, is the senator available for a quick meeting? And they were so kind, really. They said, no, but if you'd like, our environmental aid is available. That happened to me several times. And just to keep this short, I'm just going to go to this one story. So, we had already succeeded. When I say we, the organization I had just left had succeeded in getting a bill sponsored by a senator. And our so-called opponents had basically the exact same bill, but with different language, a little more strident maybe. We were trying to kind of tone it down to try to blend in, which is silly. We were both trying to do the same thing, and yet we didn't work together. So, and the culture that we'd built in my organization would have really frowned on me doing it. Not frown, I mean, that was why I ended up leaving the organization. Talking to the enemy was considered bad. But anyway, there was a senator, his name was Senator Fred Thompson, and he was famous. He was a star in Hollywood of a TV show called Chips and California Highway Patrol. I think so. He was on a motorcycle, hot guy, giving out speeding tickets on the highway. I don't know. I didn't watch the show. I just know Chips, two dudes on motorbikes in police gear. Anyway, he'd become a U.S. Senator from the state of Tennessee, it's an eastern state. It had a lot of forests, but forests were not like such a big deal there like they were in the west of the United States. And so he wasn't in a dominant position about forest policy. And I was talking to his aide. He hadn't signed on to our bill. And the other guys, they called their bill zero cut. Again, our bill was effectively zero cut, but we hid that through process. We made a very difficult process. It would be very difficult for logging, but they just went straight out and said zero cut, but they didn't make any progress because it sounded too radical. And so the members of Congress had kind of just poo-pooed the whole thing as a non-starter. Well, anyway, so I'm talking to Fred Thompson's top environmental agents by wandering into the office and risking my reputation by going up to the desk and seeing if I could meet with the senator. Because by that time, I was having meetings with anybody I wanted, pretty much anytime I wanted. I'll teach that technique to you if you want, or I'll do another video about it. So he said, well, the senator's been thinking about this issue. He doesn't want to go against the head of the whole forest subcommittee of it's the agriculture. The forests were under the Department of Agriculture of the United States. The parks were under the Department of the Interior. So a mess. There's no Department of Ecology in the United States. There are countries that have those, and they tend to have better ecosystems, because you kind of get what you focus on. So anyway, he said he doesn't want to go against the big cheese in this whole forestry political thing in the Senate, but he'd be willing to drop a bill just to end all logging on the forests in Tennessee. And if you know anything about politics, this is a great way to build a movement, because if you can get one in the US, because there's 50 states, if you can get one state to start moving the ball, well, then it's easier to go around and kind of find other people in other states. And because really politics is a lot about talking and trying to find an agreement at some point in the end with the people you disagree with. I go, that's great. That's incredible. Like, I had no idea that that was even possible, because by that time the Republicans were not, he was a Republican, the Republicans were not signing on to anything that anybody could accuse them of being an environmentalist or green. That was like green equals communist. Insanity. The idea if you like a tree, you're a commie. I'm not a communist. I'm not even really a socialist. I don't even know if I'm a capitalist. I'm an ecologist. Like, I don't care what economic system you got. Ecology is valuable. So there they were. So I called my friends, associates. I don't think we're that good of friends, to be honest. And I called them and I said, look, I just had this meeting with the aid of this Republican senator. He's willing to drop your bill in the Senate. But you have to just only his state. And this kind of shows you how hard what I'm talking about can be. And I told them, I go, oh no, we're not going to fall for that. We're not going to have a Republican carry our bill. I go, you guys, come on. In all these years, you never got even one senator to say yes to you. And here's a guy saying, I'll do the whole state of Tennessee. And again, did I have the, for me, this is really, what I'm doing right now is my actual finally I have the endurance to do something that matters, which is to keep communicating. I quit on them in a way. I don't want to blame them. The amount of love it takes to bring somebody to your side is maybe more than I had, certainly more than I had at that point, and the amount of effort. But you can see how that would be. The knee jerk would be, wait a minute, the guys that we've been taught to hate for the past, decade, they're going to be our leader in the Senate. That's the narrative. They didn't say it directly, but I mean, obviously that was what they were saying. It's like, no, we don't want to play footsie with a Republican. We need a Democratic sponsor. And it's like, well, you got no sponsor now. And this is your ticket. I really understood politics, I think, a little bit better than them by this point, and especially this new iteration. So it didn't happen. Neither the law I wanted or the law they wanted ever passed. And it's a great loss, because I know from my friends in the movement, now 24 years later, they're still fighting the same fights, because new administrations came in, new policies were issued administratively without laws. A law in the US, or really anywhere, shows the kind of midpoint of the culture. So if you can't pass the laws, that means you haven't really moved the culture far enough to get that agreement. That's where we're at. So I've never given up on the planet. And now, in a way, I'm never really going to give up on people and the idea of peace and health. And it's a bigger commitment, but at least now I'm talking every day, making videos, posting every day. And I'm finally becoming the communicator that, in a way, I never was. And so much of that had to do with just dropping my fear. A lot of things I'm saying now, I never wanted to say publicly before. Why? Out of some kind of fear. So my fear level's a lot less. And it could just be because I'm getting older and I'm just, what the hell? How much longer do I have to live? I don't know. Maybe, I hope, and at least to 100, because there's so much cool stuff actually happening. And I really want to see if these seeds that I'm planting through YouTube, if they, find some good soil in your brain and take root and flower, like I want to be around to watch and participate. So I'm putting everything I can into my own health, everything I can into my own ability to execute, and everything I can into my ability to be of service to you in fulfilling your dreams, whether they're, the things I care about directly or just your own vision for your life. My basic thesis is if people are doing what they love, most of the big issues will take care of themselves. So if you got a business or project you want to pursue, your passion project, I'm your guy. All right. If you like this video, give it a like and subscribe, and book a meeting with me if you want in the notes below. And I will see you in the next video.